Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharne Nivasesa Sunivada Paskatyade Sitarane Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utala Padkamalam Shri Guru and Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raganatham Bidam Stam Sujivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Pradijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Bitamscha Panchakalpatubhishcha Kripasindhavivata Patanam Pavaniyo Vaishnavaya. So, for those of you who weren't here for the first session, maybe a little bit lost, and hopefully you won't feel very lost in a few minutes. So we're looking at this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Chaturvanyamaya Shristam Gunakarma Vibhagashaha Tasya Kartam Apimam Vidyakartam Avyam. That there are four main fields or categories of careers. And these four categories have existed, according to the Vedas, from the very beginning of time, Apurushaya, without any, they're not created by any human. And these are, again, for those of you who weren't here for the first session, these fields have a very particular definition according to the role or the dharma of different categories of careers. And the book that we're working on with my co-author, Dr. Datta, we decided to give English names to these fields, basically because a lot of people have prejudices for and against with the Sanskrit words, which are very commonly known. So we've picked these four: artistry, resources, government, and ideas. But now we're going to be looking at a different category. There we go. Okay, thank you. So last session we defined these fields. We looked at what careers could go in each field, thought a little bit about how we feel about them and our experiences with them. In this session, we're going to be looking at initial proclivity and expertise. So for each of these four fields, we're going to be looking at what are the symptoms in our lives, or if you guide other people, you have children, you have students, people you mentor, what would be the proclivities you look at in those people to get some idea of these four fields, and then what are the behavior of people who are expert in the field, and we'll be defining expertise in a moment. Okay, good. Speaking of expertise, I feel much more expert at doing that than I felt in the last session. All right. So what do we mean by potential? We mean the qualities that indicate or a proclivity, the qualities that indicate a disposition towards work in that field. Something that shows a relationship between a potential worker and the type of work. So this is for people who are young and just starting out. This relationship is something I've run into a lot. I spent 27 years of my life teaching children and teenagers. And something that is very, very common that parents and teachers just miss or get completely wrong, where they just don't see the relationship between a person's proclivity and inclinations and what they should do for a livelihood. And one reason for this is a lemon seed doesn't look a whole lot like a lemon tree. You really have to be skilled to know, right? When I first attempted a flower garden, my very first gardening attempt at anything in my life, and I was not very ambitious. I planted marigold and zinnias, the easiest flowers to grow, but I hadn't any idea of what a little marigold plant or a little zinnia plant looked like. So my husband plowed this small plot, and I put my seeds in, and then everything was covered with green. And I had no way to tell what was a marigold, what was a zinnia, what was a weed. I had to wait till it got a lot bigger. And we find this often. Parents, teachers, mentors often mistake a person's proclivity. Oh, my computer's doing something good. We'll all live. Okay, then there's the expertise in the field. Now, the way that we're going to understand expertise is we're not just looking at the technical expertise in the skills, but we're looking at expertise in that field's dharma. Oh, it's doing this again. Why is it installing Thunderbolt software for Windows? What is it doing? I'm just going to close that and hope it doesn't come up again. Thank you for your patience with technology. So again, what we mean here is being expert not just in the particular skill, not just being an expert musician or an expert businessman in terms of the skills of my career, but expert in the Dharma. And we're going to talk a little bit this evening about cherishing our sources of wealth in terms of the 6 ways of being prosperous. There's also a way to cherish and take care of our particular field of work. And we're not going to get into that in depth, but some idea of what does it mean to be expert. I think that will become clear as we start going through the fields. These are very complex and nuanced concepts, and we're using these words in a very particular way for the purpose of this seminar, again, based on this ancient wisdom. So let's look at the potential for artistry. We can talk about, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, do I love to play with things that provide beauty and function? Is that my joy in life? Do I like to create perhaps fine art? Do I like performing services for others? Do I like exercising a craft? Now again, some of us might like doing this as a kind of relaxation, as a kind of hobby, but we might not necessarily want it as a career. So I might like to, paint once a week, or I might like to volunteer at a hospital once a week, but it might not be something that I'd want to do 8 or 10 hours a day for my whole life. So to what extent does this bring my joy in my life? Do I like using tools to create things? Or maybe I like using my body as a tool, as a dancer, as an athlete. So these are the sort of things you look at as a proclivity. One example, I'm thinking of one of my grandchildren who at a very young age was always trying to do acrobatics. Just whenever she had a spare minute, that's what she would do. And she also always wanted to be center stage. We'd go to a kirtan, and she would go to the front of the room. I mean, it was when she was very small, and just dance so everybody would see her. And at a certain point, I said to my kids, her parents, I said, she needs to learn some performing arts. So she's really gotten into gymnastics. I just saw her, and she says, I said, what do you want to do with your life? Well, I think I'd like to win the gold medal at the Olympics in gymnastics. I said, well, you might want to have a little broader career goal than that. And she's learned traditional dance. Right? So this sort of proclivity. So, of course, when she was 3 years old, she wasn't very expert, but that kind of proclivity. All right, now looking at also at the potential, the joy of I made that, I fixed that, I cleaned that. Now again, we might all enjoy this, but is that our main source of sustenance? Yes, I made that clean, right? I helped somebody after I shifted their position in that hospital bed. One thing I really noticed about people who have the potential in this field is that they really enjoy producing something that's used by others. They like to paint a picture that hangs in somebody else's house, to fix the plumbing in somebody else's house. I'm sure you've all had the experience that someone who has a job as a plumber doesn't have good plumbing in his own house. And a lot of the proclivity for the field of artistry is this mood of service. This mood that I want to do something to provide function or beauty for others. I want to move my body in a way that other people will enjoy. I want to fix something that others will enjoy. That's one of the main sources of happiness. Again, we talked about that this field was the source of all rasa, the source of all pleasure, and to provide pleasure for others. To make clothes and be happy seeing others wearing it. To look at the streets you're cleaning for others. So this is the place where people will find a joyful heart if they have those proclivities. Now we're going to look at expertise. And as I mentioned in the earlier session, the Sanskrit sacred writings almost exclusively describe the expertise in each of these fields rather than the proclivity. And the main demarcation of expertise in the field of artistry is honesty. People who have very high levels of integrity. Now that's essential to everybody, but it's particularly essential in this field if you want to do this field according to Dharma. The Dharma of the field of artistry demands a high level of integrity and honesty. It's most appreciated in the arts and the crafts and the skills. We want a car mechanic who's going to be honest. Isn't it? We want them to be a good mechanic. But in addition to being a good mechanic, what's the next thing we want? Honesty. I just had a negative experience with trying to book an airline ticket through an agency. And after I booked the ticket with the agency, I usually don't do that. I usually book it with the airline. I checked with the airline to see if they had a confirmation. You know, the agency, here's your confirmation code, and the airline had nothing. So I called the agency, and they said, let's check with the airline. I checked with the airline, they put me on hold, and everything's confirmed. Don't worry, they're having a website problem, but within 72 hours, everything, check again. So I waited an extra day beyond that, and I checked with the airline, and they had nothing. So I could understand that the person had lied to me, that he hadn't checked with the airline. So I called again, and this time I was on a 2-hour hold. On making the arrow that when the king and his retinue went by, he didn't notice. Now, Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi coined the word flow. And while anyone in any field can go into a state of flow, it's perhaps most noticeable in the field of artistry. Why? Because this is the field that produces rasa. So someone who's really expert in the field of artistry, they go into a kind of what I would call, for a lack of a better term, a kind of practical samadhi, where they're fully absorbed in what they're doing and in their craft. So this is also a symptom of expertise. Not that they're involved in their craft or their service and they're zoning out to some other place. So a real love of one's craft is also a symptom of expertise. The satisfaction that I'm doing something that's really needed. It's really essential. And being happy with a job well done. This results in a kind of natural humility, which is also a sign of dharmic expertise in this field. As I mentioned earlier, in the field of artistry, people are generally satisfied with simplicity in life. These people generally are not very ambitious. They usually don't want to make a whole lot of money. They're usually not interested in a whole lot of fame. They want to be appreciated, but they're often just satisfied with the work itself and with making this contribution of service to society, using their abilities to help others. So you'll often find people who've perfected the Dharma in this field. They're satisfied with a simple home, their work, their family, their loved ones, like that, with making that basic contribution to society. Now, tomorrow when we talk about what happens when we cross fields, we're going to look at what happens when people who aren't suited for this field work in it? And we'll see there the degradation. It's actually a very sad thing. The degradation, the pollution of this field. How that many people who ought to be working in this field, because of the entrance of others who don't belong there, have sucked the joy out of the field of artistry. So that many people in this field, it's very difficult for them to find deep pleasure in their service or their craft. Okay. These are the main questions that people in this, who are suited to this field, ask about their work, that if they answer in the affirmative, they feel happy. Is my work supportive? Is my work beautiful? Now, we all may care about doing work that's supportive and doing work that's beautiful to some extent. But is this the main question? These questions indicate somewhat of one's proclivity and certainly one's expertise. So I'd like you to just take a few minutes, and if you can write down anything in your life that's related to this field in terms of either proclivity or expertise. Do you see a lot of this in yourself? A little bit? Not at all? Is it attractive to you? Again, think of this in terms of livelihood. And you may want to think in terms of proclivity about something from your childhood. And what's really interesting about proclivity is sometimes the things that we do in our childhood that indicate our disposition towards a certain field are things that annoyed our parents and teachers. So like my granddaughter was told, stop jumping around the living room. Right? Stop doing cartwheels in the kitchen. Or when I was vice principal of school, and I wish this wasn't a true story. So one of the teachers came to complain about one of the kids and said, this kid is a discipline problem. We need to call the parents in for a conference. What's the kid's problem? She said, well, whenever a guest comes to the door, he jumps up and runs over to the guests and welcomes them to the classroom and disrupts the whole class. And I always say to them, look, I'm the one with the degree. I'm the teacher. Sit down. And she said, whenever a kid's pencil breaks, he jumps up out of his seat, takes a pencil, and goes and sharpens it for them. And I'm always saying, sit down and stop disrupting the class. And he never listens to me. And anytime a kid is having a problem with what they're doing, he jumps up out of his seat and runs over to them and starts helping them. She called the parents in for a conference. She recommended that the kid get counseling. I said, why don't you make him the official helper in the classroom? The official guest reader, and train him how to be helpful. Right? The main question this kid was asking about himself is it supportive? But the teacher simply found it annoying, and much to my sorrow, the parents agreed with the teacher. I mean, I was the assistant principal, but anyway, I was ignored. So it's not that uncommon that the way we're going to see our proclivity is in something that our parents or teachers found annoying. I forget his name, but there's a YouTube video. It's become a rather famous guy. And all through school he was doing this. And he was constantly getting into trouble from his teachers, always being sent to the principal's office. One day, about 10 or 11, he said that one teacher says, I want you to stay after class. He's like, okay, I'm going to get in trouble again. And after class, the teacher hands him a pair of drumsticks and says, hey, become a drummer. And he became a world-class drummer. So when you're looking at this proclivity, it might be something that other people told you was wrong. Like John Audubon, why are you looking out the window and drawing birds all day? Why aren't you paying attention to the class? Okay, so if you think about with the field of artistry again, how do you feel about your work? And what sort of, is there anything in your life that shows that maybe you have some interest in this field? If it can't be sustainable. Next field. That'll be the next field. We're looking at support here in terms of providing a function for society. So people in this field are the main people who keep society moving. They're the people who provide function in society and beauty in society. So we're looking at support mostly in that sense. But I like what you said, and we're going to hit that in the next field. So moving on to the field of resources. So potential. So this is a love of playing with natural resources, land, crops, animals, money, not animals just as pets. Maybe staying on top of ways to earn more money, which is described in the Bhagavad Purana in 11, 17, 18. Always thinking about, all right, how can I play with this resource to make more money? And again, I'm sure we know people who as a young age had their own businesses, as we mentioned earlier. So my youngest son, when he was 7, started a business with school supplies, because at that time I was running a school. And he said, you know, Mommy, what if I sell pencils and notebooks to all the other kids? Without a grasp of the flow of resources. So here we start getting to people who have some degree of systems thinking, usually just in a limited area. They may see the systems of certain agricultural products, more of this product, when do people buy less? At what place on the shelf does it sit so that people are more likely to buy it? When is the supply going to be able to come in? When is it not coming in? When does it come in at different levels of quality? How can I get it out to the market better? So to understand this flow, they can kind of sense the system once a person becomes expert in this field. They understand the different natural productions, the seasons, and this can be seasons in terms of banking, in terms of investing, and in terms of, you know, growing of cranberries, depending on which resources they're dealing with. They have a sense of their competitors in the marketplace, so that they're an expert in the field of resources, can have this vision as a whole. They're not just seeing one particular craft or one particular thing. Now, something very significant for the people who are expert in this field is that they're redirecting the flow of resources to benefit themselves and to provide wealth for others. So first, people who are expert, they're able to sense the flow, sense the system of resources, and then they're able to manipulate or control or redirect that flow so that they benefit and other people benefit. So like, I know someone they were working for another company, and they saw that, well, when I work for this company, the customers are paying money to a lot of middlemen who don't really give them anything of value. So I could start my own company and I could eliminate a lot of these middlemen, and then more of the money would be going to me, and the customer would be getting something of greater value. Now, a basic principle of this expertise is putting on your own oxygen mask first, which creates a lot of misunderstanding of people who aren't naturally in this field. Why do those in the field of resources care about their own profit so much? Because they've understood that I can't provide this flow of resources to society unless I have it myself. If I'm not properly situated in terms of my own wealth, in terms of my own position, then I'm not able to provide others with this wealth. Because remember, these are people who are actually generating the wealth. They're not redistributing it. They're in one sense, they're creating it. They see the strength of their own position is interdependent with everyone else. They understand that it's their duty to society to make sure that they're taken care of first. Otherwise, they won't be in a position to help others. And we'll look at this tomorrow in the first session as what happens when people who don't have this mood get into this field. If someone who doesn't have this mood that I've got to take care of myself first, and I've got to make sure the flow of these resources come to me first. People who are just, no, I'm going to give to everybody else first. What happens when they go into this field? What do they do to the field? So people